Well, welcome to week number 3 in our 7-week fall series, where, in case you haven't guessed it, the color is pink. And I'm sorry I'm a little bit informal today, but this is the only pink shirt that I have, and is likely to be the only pink shirt that I will probably own into the future, although I'm told it works well. But anyway, pink can be a stretch for us guys, but sometimes we need to be stretched a little bit. Isn't that right?
Amen.
Stretching is good. And that's what this book is designed to do, to stretch us a little bit, actually to transform us. The book we're working with is this one up here, Living Originally, 10 Spiritual Practices to Transform Your Life. We're only going to be working with 5 of those spiritual practices, in case you haven't noticed, because the other 5 are sort of what you call extra credit. We're working with the 5 core practices, and the key word up there is transform. Transformation means more than just a change in our lifestyle. Transformation is about changing our fundamental identity, because for most of our lives, we're 100% identified with our personality. Who we are, what we believe, what we think, what we feel are largely determined by the world around us. How we react to the world is what forms our personality. The personality gets defined by our needs and by all of the strategies and methods that we devise to meet those needs. So living originally means that we are no longer controlled by the personality, and also by the needs and the strategies that are generated by the personality. When we're controlled by the personality, we sometimes call that living egocentrically, which means that by definition, we're living from an incomplete sense of self. When we believe that the ego or the personality is the sum total of who we are believing in a falsehood. That's why we call it sometimes the false self. So, personality, ego, false self, they basically all mean the same thing. Personality is just a small part of the picture, and it's not what we want to have running the show. Robert points out in the book that most of our perceived problems arise from this false sense of self. The practices that are offered in this book are designed to help us to see, and really to more importantly, actually experience the false self at work in our lives, to experience all of the ways that we let the ego run the show. And then we get to learn that there's another way to live. I think I introduced this book starting in the September newsletter, and I mentioned in that article that a lot of this sounds very Buddhist, and it is. But we can also find this same transformational message in the teachings of the other world's great religions. Both Jesus and the Buddha, I think, were early pioneers in getting people to see a deeper reality beyond ego identification. For example, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That is what you might call an ego-driven way of dealing with conflict in the world. It's the ego that drives us to store up material wealth and possessions as a way to find security. Now, I think we all know what Jesus had to say about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. He said, the heck with all that. Instead, we're supposed to love our enemies, pray for those who persecute you. He flipped that around completely. Talking about storing up possessions, he said, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Remember that one? Do not store up treasures on earth where moth and rust consume and thieves break in and steal. He also said, don't worry what you are to wear or what you are to eat. Things like that. And after Jesus and the Buddha were gone, their followers continued to develop and refine this message, and ultimately to give us practices that are designed to help us to transcend the personality and to live from a more complete picture of who we are. Karen said before, she called the book Living Authentically. I think that that's a perfectly acceptable way of describing it. Living authentically, living originally, getting back to our true nature. They both work here. And I was saying last Sunday that the followers of Jesus and the Buddha, especially through the Catholic Church on the Christian side and the various forms of Buddhist meditation on the other side, they have been perfecting these practices for years, but it hasn't been until relatively recently, maybe in the last 50 or 60 years, that these kinds of practices have finally made their way into our modern culture where lay people, you don't have to be a monk or a nun anymore to benefit from these practices. They're available to all of us now. So on the back cover of the book, there's an interesting statement that I want to start things out with today. Robert says that we see the world not as it is, but as we are. And I don't know who it was that first said that. It wasn't Robert. I've heard various people, it's attributed to various people. But we see the world not as it is, but as we are. And I think there's something about that that's intuitively true. We hear that and we think, yes, that sounds right at a gut level. And on further reflection, we can see that it's supported by the evidence of daily living. Here's a little experiment we can do this morning. Put a picture of a tomato up there, right? When we look at a tomato, we're not just seeing a tomato. We end up projecting a whole raft of other things onto the image, like I prefer the yellow ones. Or how about this one? Grocery store tomato. Yuck, right? Looks like a grocery store tomato. Or maybe it's not ripe. Or the other side of it would be, no, it's too ripe, right? What else might there be? Oh, I get heartburn from tomatoes. And what else might there be? Oh, I only eat heirloom tomatoes. You know, I mean, so do you notice what's happened here? Do you notice what's happened here? We're not seeing a tomato anymore, are we? We're seeing us. We're seeing our personality. We're seeing our likes, our dislikes, our personality-driven preferences. We have obliterated that poor tomato. What did it ever do to us to deserve that, right? What did that poor tomato ever do to deserve that? And we can do that same thing with anything that falls into our field of perception, including people and ourselves. We do it to ourselves. We obliterate our original nature with our opinions and our judgments about ourselves. That brings us to the practice for this week, deep self-acceptance. Last week we learned all about radical self-awareness. That practice naturally flows into what we're working on this week. Once we sharpen our awareness, once we start seeing the things that we've been missing because we just simply haven't been paying attention, what do we do with them? Especially some of the things we start to see about ourselves. The common definition of self-acceptance means that I have an image of myself that I find acceptable. That's the common meaning of it. I mean, this isn't rocket science, right? I mean, self-acceptance, I have an image of myself that I find acceptable. It means that I think that I'm okay based on the standards of my family and my culture, all those things. And this is a fragile image. This is a fragile image because if for some reason I no longer meet the standards of my family or my culture and things like that, my self-image can go right out the window. We've known people, I'm sure, who have perhaps lost a job and have been just totally adrift. They've lost their sense of identity. It happens. Think about what happens when an attractive celebrity puts on some weight, or maybe an athlete goes into a slump. What happens? We think differently about them sometimes. People write differently about them. Deep self-acceptance calls on us to do something totally different, to stop identifying with the stuff that we get from out there. It's deep because it has nothing to do with those external standards, which are often arbitrary and shallow. Deep self-acceptance means we get to stop comparing ourselves against any ideal or standard. Now, there are times we may need to do that. We need to hold up our behavior against the requirements of law. We're not talking about that here. We're talking about deep self-acceptance. The definition that we're using for deep self-acceptance is simply the unconditional acceptance of my present moment experience. whatever that experience may be. The unconditional acceptance of my present moment experience, whatever that experience may be. It's a moment-to-moment internal experience, and that's something Robert stresses in the book. It's an experience, not an image, not our words, and not our actions. The big question is, can we allow the experience of each moment to simply be whatever it is without interfering in any way? Can we be fully present to each experience without any resistance, analysis, interpretation, manipulation, or control? This is a practice that really is designed to get us in touch with one of the core issues of the human condition. Whenever a pleasant feeling arises, have you ever noticed that our tendency is to want to hang on to it, to prolong it, to devise a strategy to be able to repeat it? And then when an unpleasant thing arises, our reaction is just the opposite. Our tendency is to try to get rid of it, push it away, deny it, stuff it, whatever. We end up creating this feedback loop of clinging to the good stuff and trying to avoid the unpleasant stuff. Entanglement and suffering, and all we end up doing is perpetuating fear. Think about it. We fear that this pleasant feeling will go away and never return. That's why we cling to it and devise strategies to make it come back. Or we fear that this unpleasant feeling or experience will never go away. Sounds like a strange way to live, but I'll bet it sounds a little bit familiar. Part of the human condition. And wouldn't it be great to stop doing that? If we could learn to simply accept the experience of each moment, to accept the feelings that arise in each moment, if we can experience them without the clinging and aversion, then they can move through us. Through us like the changing weather around us. That's the gift we can give to ourselves. That's quite a gift to ourselves, to be free of that kind of entanglement and fear cycle. But there's more to it than that. When we're unaware and unaccepting, we are far more likely to project our fears out onto others in the form of our words and actions. When we accept an internal experience, it doesn't mean that we act out our feelings. I'm sure we've all known people who have this tendency to always want to point out errors and faults every chance they get. Now, I don't mind if somebody's going to tell me, quietly that I have a piece of spinach on my teeth or a tag sticking up on my shirt or something like this. I'm not talking about that. You know the kind of people that I'm talking about. In fact, we have a common term for it. When people do that, we have a way of describing it. We say things like, "Oh, he really speaks his mind," right? And it's just a lovable quirk as long as it's directed at someone else. It's a whole different story when we're on the receiving end of somebody who really speaks their mind and tells it like it is. When we're on the receiving end, it looks something like this. That's what it feels like, right? That's the experience we have. No filter, whatever they see, it comes up in a thought and blip, out it comes, We've all known people like that, I'm sure. It's not such a lovable quirk at that point, is it? And I got a couple more observations up here about critics. Criticism. The sharing of pontifications that no one really wants to hear. And here's another one. Before you criticize someone, you should walk a mile in their shoes. That way, when you criticize them, you're a mile away and you have their shoes. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person. I want to accept my internal experiences and be able to act ethically and responsibly, which in many, many situations means that I simply be quiet and listen. I want there to be some separation between my internal experiences that I accept and my words and my actions. There are times when words and actions are appropriate. Last week during our discussion group, I think everybody was pretty much on the same page. We talked about the difference between reacting and responding. Reactions are automatic. We have little control over them because they seem to come out of nowhere. And that's because we're all designed with this beautiful nervous system that is designed to react without conscious thought in many different situations. If I'm crossing the street and I'm in the path of a car that isn't going to stop, I don't want to waste a second analyzing that situation or accepting it. I want to be able to leap quickly and automatically out of the way. But that same neurological response doesn't work so well in our interpersonal relationships. Because the ego, the personality, it wants to be right. Because it feels good to think that we're right, we're righteous, we're mighty. Nothing that we disagree with can go by without comment. That's the way the ego works. And if we're unaware and unaccepting, out it comes. First time we hear something we disagree with, or as we said last week, somebody pushes our button, creates problems. So, as we started learning last week, these practices are designed to help us to deal with those tendencies that we have. And each practice has two forms, formal and general. Formal practice is time that we set aside each day where we can be apart from the demands of daily living. And that's an important thing because it's really a lot more challenging to go out into the world and practice. We need to take some time away from that to set the foundation. Now, we've given you a handout in your bulletin, and you'll find a link to the website for this book where there is a guided meditation for each one of these practices. The idea is that you use the guided meditation as part of your formal practice. Robert Brummett narrates it. He guides you through the meditation, guides you through what the practice is. So you can find the practice for today, deep self-acceptance, and use that as part of your formal practice. And during the formal practice, what we learn is that for every feeling and experience that arises, there is this observer, or we can call it a witness to that experience that is not the experience. For example, if I'm sitting quietly and a feeling of sadness arises, practicing awareness, I notice it. Practicing acceptance, I simply accept that it's there without calling it good, bad, or analyzing why it's there. I simply see it and I say, sadness. And as we do that, we will notice that that feeling, that experience will gradually dissolve and change or morph into something else. However, that which is aware of the feeling of sadness, as it changes, doesn't change along with it. That which is aware of the sadness doesn't change. That which is aware of the sadness is not itself sad. That's quite a realization. That's what this practice is designed to get us in touch with. There's a part of us that is right now free from all of that. And the only reason we don't see it is because we don't take the time to practice awareness and acceptance. So these practices help us to get a glimpse of our original self. The formal practice sets the foundation for going out into the world, and then we get to do the practice in everyday life, which is what we call the general practice. And it's more challenging because we have very little control over our external environment and what people are going to say to us or what we're going to hear on the radio or see on TV. In that respect, everything that we encounter potentially becomes something that we can practice with, that we can work with. In every interaction, we can ask, am I reacting and resisting, or am I being aware and accepting, and if necessary, responding? Resistance can be a major obstacle in this practice. It's so easy to fall back into that pattern of craving and aversion, and if we do, we simply acknowledge it. It's another thing to notice and to accept. Let it be and continue with the practice. Another one of the obstacles to practice is this temptation to give into denial. Instead of seeing and accepting our feelings, we deny them, pretend that they aren't really there. Angry? Who? Me? I'm way too spiritual for anger. Then we put on the outer appearance, right, of being peaceful and at one with the world. You know the old saying, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but eventually the truth comes out, and it has a tendency to do it at a time when it's least convenient. We want to be honest with ourselves. Are we courageous enough to admit to ourselves the fear, the anger, the judgment, the pride, the self-righteousness, whatever it happens to be, whatever it is that arises? This is what Robert says in the book about what can happen when we put these practices of awareness and acceptance together. He says, as I gain greater awareness and acceptance of my internal experiences, I can become clearer on the intention behind my words and actions. The more clear and conscious I am, the more I am responding to my deepest needs rather than my conditioned desires. As I listen to my deeper needs, I find life's options will increase, and I am less conflicted with others and with my life circumstances. More options, less conflict, sounds pretty good to me. So we have a discussion group that's meeting today at 11:30. We'll be in the youth and family ministry area there. Remember, during the week, if you haven't had a chance to be part of the discussion group, it's there to support you in this practice. So if you're working during the week with these practices, starting to put them together, if something comes up, write it down. Keep a journal. If there's anything that you want to discuss and see what others have been experiencing, any way we can support you, bring your questions to our discussion group, and we'll do our very best to clarify things for you. Until then, may your practice go well, and we will see you all next week. Thank you.